Let's get into our first topic now. And should Labour ditch its plans to tax private schools? Get your calls in for this one now. So Keir Starmer has made it really clear that if Labour came to power at the next general election, the party would introduce VAT on independent school fees. Now, the party claimed that it could raise £1.7 billion in taxes and that they would invest that in the state education. But critics claim that the tax would push a quarter of independent students into the state school education due to an increase in the school fees and could mean thousands of teachers are made unemployed. Now, Labour say that it's up to the schools whether or not that increase in cost is passed on to the parents, but should they call off the plan altogether? Esther, what do you think?
I think they'll probably be forced to, because it's not a very well thought out plan. One of the issues that you have is you inevitably have an exodus of students that will try and get places in state schools because their parents can't afford it. And this £1.7 billion that Labour is claiming they can get from that, so this policy is only works if there isn't that exodus. I suspect it'll be a lot less. And also £1.7 billion in the grand scheme of things and how much we spend on education and all of that, is not actually a lot of money. I think the larger structural issues in our education system, like, gutting grammar schools and all of that, but the biggest problem I have with this is Keir Starmer believes that the people that send their kids to independent schools is because they're rich and they have too much money and all of that. They're often people that live in communities where the state school system isn't very good and their children might have special needs and they can only get the kind of required attention that they need, like sort of more one-to-one care with teachers from fee-paying schools. And you kill social mobility and the ability for people to move up in life if you say, actually, this is your only choice and you get it. Obviously, there'll be a time lag between even if he does get that money to invest in state schools and when actually people will benefit from it. So the whole policy is poorly thought out.
Henry, what do you think?
Whenever I see a story like this, Storm, I always look at the source, and it is the Adam Smith Institute, champion of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng and their economic policy, and that fantastic budget, you remember, from a few years ago, OK? And I've read the story. There's no basis for predicting that 25% of private pupils will go to the state sector and flood it. There's absolutely no basis. More, but yeah, you're right. There's no basis. The Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies says it's between 3 and 7%, netting about 1.3 billion for Labour as opposed to 1.7. Look at the politics. The policy is popular. I think in terms of the policy.
I just want to talk about the statistics.
Let me land for a second, please. Okay. Let me land, as they say in Accra. Okay. 57 to 60% of people consistently say they like this policy. And at a time when both Labour and Conservatives are fighting over the same ground as we approach an election, then it's good for the public to have a choice. If people can clearly define what Labour stands for or what the Conservatives stands for, politically, that's right.
Okay,
then ethically, only 6 to 7%
that's
of people
fine.
go to private school.
People can like a bad policy. That's fine. On the statistics, I do agree.
People want to get elected.
I do agree with you that the Adam Smith Institute, you can argue that they're doing a bunch of guesswork, but you can also level that same argument with the Labour Party. Well, it's guesswork to say that they'll get 1.7 billion
I'm looking at the track record of the organisation.
Yes, but we also have to look at the track record. You also have to look at the track record of the Labour Party. If they're guessing, they're estimating.
Well, they've got access to a lot of highly paid economists.
But the market is obvious. If they're saying that they're going to get 1.7 billion pounds from this policy, it depends on a lot. Yep. It depends on a lot of students not leaving private education.
Everything people do in government depends on forecasting.
But this is the thing. But that's why this is a poorly thought out policy. Because if you're telling the public that knows that we spend tens of billions of pounds on education, that at most you'll get 1.7 billion pounds, and you're willing to risk a bunch of privately educated students flooding the state sector, which is already inadequate, which already needs a lot of work.
Well, according to the current government, doing fantastically on maths and English over the last 10 or so years since the introduction of phonics and the different styles of teaching of maths. So apparently, according to our current government,
still woefully low.
Exactly.
In some areas, compared to Japan and Taiwan and Singapore. But so is everybody.
Here's a question for you, Henry. It's 1.7 billion, which sounds like a lot of money. When you look at the education system, it's probably quite small.
Depends what
You've
you
already
do. It's less than
accused the government
5%
of
of what
playing
we spend
politics
on
with this. So is that what they're doing? They're just playing politics here rather than it being a good financial move?
I think they're giving people choice. People are desperate.
That's what
and to
politics.
govern, no, but to govern is to choose. Government is all about deciding who is going to be winners and losers for the greater good.
That's the point.
And no,
they shouldn't be.
Why
should the government decide who gets to be winners and losers?
But it does. Every single policy.
Would you be
absolutely
okay?
Every
would you
single
be okay
policy,
with the government deciding that your child gets to be a loser?
The triple lock.
No, hold on. Answer the question. Would you be okay with the government deciding that your child gets to be the loser?
That's a
yes or no?
No, it's not yes or no.
No, but you said government chooses.
If the government
is that okay?
going to levy an extra tax on my child's...
Why don't you answer the question?
No. Because I'm answering it.
No, it's a yes or no question. Would you, if you said the government gets to decide who gets to be winners or losers, would you be happy with the government choosing your child to be a winner or loser?
The government decides on everything.
But is that okay?
No, of course.
So you're happy if the government just decides Henry Bonsu's child gets to be a loser?
If long term my child gets to be a winner. Because if I'm investing 10, 15, whatever £1,000 on my child's education privately, knowing that long term they will end up being a winner, because that's what parents are doing. No, of course, that's what parents are doing. 65% of the judges in our country went to private school. 50% of MPs. That is an argument. Permanent secretaries.
That is an argument.
60% of people who run the army and the navy
to improve state education. That's not an argument to rob people of the choice of where they educate their child.
How do you improve state education? You improve funding, you improve education.
You improve the structure.
Access, you do redistribution.
This isn't going to improve funding. This is going to improve... We spend tens of billions of pounds on education a year in this country. You're telling us that you're going to risk flooding the state education sector with thousands of students that can no longer afford private education for at most... Hold on, let me land. For at most a benefit of £1.7 billion, which is minuscule, which is a drop in the ocean.
Depending on how you're going to use it.
Thought out policy. I'm all for improving state education.
No, you're
giving
not.
people... No, absolutely.
How?
Why would I want to live in a country where people are robbed of decent education?
How?
But I back it if it's done with sensible policy that will actually get maximum benefit.
Sensible policy like what Adam Smith Institute, Liz Truss,
I agree with you that I'm not quoting them because it's guesswork. But so is the Labour Party. They're also doing guesswork. And the guesswork they're doing is pathetic.
What you call guesswork has a more robust analysis than this Adam Smith Institute.
So you trust the Labour Party more than the Adam Smith?
No, it's not the Labour Party. I trust people like the Institute for Fiscal Studies. They're more independent and they're sounder than some of these other organisations.
You can choose whichever guesswork numbers you sponsor.
Some days they criticise government, sometimes they're against the government.
There are policies that can get the education sector more investment that will not risk the state of state schools, like taxing foreign companies that don't pay any tax in the UK, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, hold on, but that's more sensible, and you can get more.
What about if those companies leave the country then?
Well, that's you didn't plan your policy very well.
All right, okay.
Okay, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. What do you think about taxing private schools, putting VAT on independent school fees in order to put a little bit more money into the state education, if that's where the money goes? 0207 862 2222. I really would love to hear from you on this one. Henry, it is a bit of a risk for this policy because they're not going to get that much money. 1.7, how much of an impact? 1.7 billion, how much of an impact is that going to have on the state education?
It depends how you use it. You could use it for Sure Start, you can use it for teacher bonuses, you can use it for mental health in schools. These are all some of the breakfast clubs. These are some of the range of policies that Labour wants to use this money for. It is affordable.
Can I contextualise what £1.7 billion in funding for state education looks like? It looks like 2 constituencies in southern England.
What in those constituencies?
How much you fund like 2 constituencies in southern England, 2 large constituencies. That's how much £1.7 billion looks like. So I don't know what kind of grand plan you think you can do with this pittance, basically.
You call it a pittance, but it depends because £1.7 billion spread across 67 million people, that's how many are in the country, won't go very far. But across a couple of 100,000 children, it may help. But
the thing is, if that money can be used to fund just about 2 constituencies in England.
It depends. When you say fund 2 constituencies, what do you mean?
The amount of funding, I'll break it down. The amount of funding that 2 constituencies and the schools within those require from the state to function. That is how much you will get. That is how much you get
single child
maximum from this policy, assuming everything goes right and students don't leave the private education sector. Which, guess what? They will. I don't care whether you think it's 5% or 10% or 50%. There will be inevitably people that cannot afford it.
I'm going to go to the calls. Nikki from Cheshire, what's your thoughts on this? Do you think VAT on private school fees is fair? We pay VAT on pretty much everything else.
I just don't think it's that simple. I think you have to look at the fact that the first schools that will be will be the smaller primary schools. Now, I can tell you that in Cheshire and the area that I live in, and I do know what I'm talking about, there are no places for those children. Which schools are they going to be going to? Well, what will happen is parents will be given a school miles away. So Keir Starmer needs to be thinking about having to get taxis to send those children to these areas where there are places. Sometimes you can't, if there's a family that are having to be reschooled, then you can't get the places. So you might have a place for the 6-year-old and you won't have a place for the 11-year-old.
Nikki, I'm totally hearing what you're saying, because I think that's happening already in some areas in the country. And you're right, if people are going to leave private school and enter the state system, it's going to only exacerbate that issue. However, Labour doesn't think that many people are going to be leaving the private sector. They think that they will just swallow the extra costs and march on, in which case more money can be put into the state education. What do you think to that?
Well, that's not going to work, because it'll be the poorer, smaller schools that will go, because they will not be able to maintain, the costs, and the pupils will leave because they won't be able to pay the fees anymore. Educating children is expensive, whether you're in the state system or the private system. My heart is definitely in state education, and even though I've got my family are teachers and head teachers in the private sector, you see, there's a huge problem with retention of teachers as well. So if you've got overcrowding in a lot of these schools because you've been having to create more places for these children that are leaving, and they will be leaving, there are a lot of people who will not be able to pay those school fees.
Teachers is another big problem, actually, as far as the Adam Smith Institute is concerned, because they think that there's about 2,000 spaces in the state system for teachers that are needed, and about 5,000 teachers could be made redundant or no longer employed in the private sector.
That's the back of a fag paper, calculation.
Well, I mean, even if you say they're guessing, the others are saying they're guessing.
Even if you don't want to agree with the Adam Smith numbers, which is fine. I don't have a problem with you saying they supported Liz Truss, they're cranks. That's fine. You are allowed to.
Didn't say they were cranks,
but you're allowed to believe what you want. But the reality is, there will be students that will have to leave the private education sector, inevitably. I don't care what number you put on it. And also, Keir Starmer doesn't recognise the huge sacrifices that families often have to make to be able to send their kids to private schools. It's not just because they're trying to be pompous or to differentiate themselves with students that go to state schools, many of whom actually get better results than students who go to private schools.
Right.
It's also, you have to look at their special needs. They might not be able to get the kinds of attention that they need from the state school.
The majority of the people or children who go to those schools are in that category. The vast majority
but they're the ones that will be disproportionately affected.
Well, the vast majority,
we have to recognise.
Well, there may be breaks, there may be concessions, and some of those schools would rather moderate or drop their costs than see this massive exodus, because otherwise they will close.
OK, but do you accept, I mean, that would make the schools very altruistic.
But it happened during COVID. A lot had to drop their fees.
I think you're operating
do you
in
accept that if students leave, it will be the poorer students, it will be the parents that are on the line of being able to afford the private school or not, that will be the ones that suffer the most?
We don't know.
But we do know. You just don't want to accept it because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with your fantasy worldview.
No, it's not a fantasy worldview.
But you went to private school. How can you make this argument?
My parents worked hard, but also I got a scholarship. I got a bursary.
Yeah, no, but the thing is, there's some people that might not.
Can I tell you something?
There might not be people
back
that
in
can get a bursary.
1979, I'm very old. It cost £1,000 to go to my independent Catholic grammar school. Right? There were 700 pupils. Now it costs 13,000 is more than double that number. So, although people are price sensitive, the desire to give their children
more than double. It's more than 13,000. £13,000.
No. It's £13,000.
No,
and it costs
the number of people going to the school.
Yeah, but it cost you £1,000 when you went to the school. Yeah. Now it costs £13,000.
Yes.
That's 13 times the number.
I'm talking about the number of people going to the school.
Okay.
When I went there, it was 700. Now there's 1,400 going to the school. So what I mean is,
the fees
even though the fees have gone up hugely, double the number of people still go. So, according to your calculation, none would go because it's too expensive.
Back to the calls.
Nikki, we don't know the demographics of the people going. They might be foreign students.
John from Essex, what's your thoughts on taxing private school fees?
Well, my thought on taxing private school isn't necessarily to do with the tax they pay, but wouldn't it be far easier if we only had one system of education and we abolished all private education? we abolished grammar schools and we just had the one state system, then all the elitists in our society I don't believe in an equal society. I do believe in a fair society, but all the privileges will.
I hear what you're saying.
I don't have a problem with that, actually. If the standards were to a very high level, one of the arguments you can make about private schools is they actually keep standards high because you have something to compare it to. You say, my kid in private school gets these benefits, why doesn't my child in state school get it? So it actually keeps certain standards high. The problem that you have is there will always be students that are more gifted than others, that need more attention than others, that need more things than other or more resources than other students. How do you differentiate between those if you just have one system? If that's all under the state, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you have to have a well-crafted policy to make that work. I have no problem with ensuring excellent education for every British child in this country, but you have to it has to be backed by sensible policy that will work.
Well, that's also ensuring that the education system is going to be excellent. And actually, a comment that Owen Jones has just sprung to my mind, made earlier on in the show with Jeremy during the news review, is that actually, well, first of all, there's a bit of a postcode lottery as far as education is concerned in this country. Some schools are much better than others. You see that in Ofsted reports. But on top of that, John, even if you did that system, then you're still going to get wealthier parents that are just going to tutor their children. They're going to end up privately educating their child at home. So you're still going to get a discrepancy in the education system, child by child.
Well, I'm sorry.
Well, and also private tutoring is mostly used by parents from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So there's this perception that richer parents tutor their kids more. Actually, they just probably send their kids to independent schools.
Yes, but if John got his way and everything was a unified system and everyone went to the same school, then the wealthier parents would be using their additional funds to tutor their children. So they would still be getting a private education just at home.
Well, I went to a comprehensive... Oh, sorry, you can't hear me, can you?
No, we can hear you.
Oh, well, I went to a comprehensive school. I left when I was 15, and I ended up with a degree in science. I ended up teaching science. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you're bright or not bright, because I weren't particularly academic in my early school career, believe it or not, but that came later. But children will do what children want to do. There will always be a system of differences.
I mean, true. So maybe there's just always going to be unfairness, John.
Well, the biggest push comes from home. I mean, I grew up in a
very, very hard,
very rough, very difficult and sometimes dangerous area of Manchester. But my parents had this notion that I was going to do better. And so, yeah, my brother and sister had a little bit of private tuition. I went to this independent Catholic grammar school. We had this Catholic obedient ethos, as it were. But I recognise the privileges and the advantages that have been given to me. And I think we've got to try and find a system and we've got to try and edge towards one that would give, as many children as possible a better chance. And the system we have at the moment only advantages a very small slice of people who are not motivated one iota to change it.
Would you get rid of the private sector?
Long term, possibly, yes.
But the thing is, that's not true, because statistically, the students that perform the best in school, that have the highest levels of scholastic attainment, are Asian British students, so Indian and Chinese mainly, and Black West African girls. Yeah. And what they have all in common is they come from homes that put a huge emphasis on education. So actually, if your argument is it's private education that's pushing people ahead, that's not true. It's the homes that they come from, and the emphasis that they place, and the emphasis that you place. Hold on, let me land. And the emphasis that they place on scholastic attainment. And I'm sorry, you can't legislate that out. You can't make it illegal for you to. No, but that's what creating. Hold on, but that's what's creating differences in scholastic attainment. It's mainly the homes they come from.
Interestingly, I think that's somewhere where you both actually agree that the home is a huge impact on your final.
But when the home isn't functioning in a way that can help the children, the state, like it or not, has to step in.
Nigel from Tyne, what's your thoughts on this taxing private school fees?
Well, I feel that it's not particularly aspirational because the people who pay the school fees have already paid tax on that money. I know they're removing or charging VAT on the fees, but it intrigues me that that the view independent education as being elitist and everything, when in fact it's not necessarily elitist.
But Nigel, we pay VAT on everything else. Why not on private school fees? If you want to go out and buy a designer jacket, you'll pay VAT on that. If you go out and buy, absolutely anything, you'll pay VAT on it. Why not school fees?
Well, I think the money that the people spend on their children's education has already been taxed anyway. So in a sense, it's
and also
been additionally taxed. And it would have. I don't know whether I can't speak globally about this, but it would appear that the independent education is resented by the Labour government.
Why do you think that is?
Can I just make the point? Education is not the same as a luxury jacket, right? We pay VAT on most things, but we don't pay VAT on essential things. The reason why you don't pay VAT on education is, one, it's an essential good, and also they provide a service to the community. So a lot of independent schools educate people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that are highly gifted. They educate them for free, and we don't talk about the social benefit about that because we're more interested in crafting bad policy that punishes people that actually want to make the choice for their own students.
Do you think this is a politics of envy then?
It is the politics of envy. Listen, if you want to close... Hold on, let me land.
You need to circle. I'm not letting you land.
If you want to close the gap between students that are performing the best in school and performing the worst, then you need to legislate against cultures that actually place a high emphasis on scholastic attainment. You need to penalise the Asian British people and the British people of West African heritage that place a high emphasis on their students and their kids doing well at school.
I think there'll be an issue with that. Nigel, thank you very much for your call. James from Shropshire, what's your thoughts?
Well, hi. Good morning, Storm. Thank you for having me on. Now, should Labour ditch plans to tax private schools? Absolutely, it's ridiculous. Okay. Let me just fill you in on this. I'm a governor of a local primary school. Within the locality, we have a private school. We're able to use the facilities of that private school as well as 4 or 5 other schools within a 5-mile radius.
And that's how they get their charitable status, right, James?
Well, exactly. And without that, my primary school wouldn't have that benefit, as well as the other 3 or 4 local primary schools.
But James, wouldn't you accept that these are businesses and you are paying VAT on the business service that you are getting? You are investing in your child's education, the people who send their children there, and longer term they will reap the benefits. So it's a taxable business service.
Well, I'm only concerned about, particularly, obviously, a school governor of my particular school, but not only do we use the facilities, but this particular school has a theatre, and we're able to use that theatre. The theatre is quite famous now, actually. I won't go into what it is, but that's used along with the other facilities like swimming and the outdoor sports.
All of that's great, and they should do that for all the benefits they get, James.
But if we didn't have that, honestly, if we didn't have that along with the other 5 schools in the locality, it would be detrimental to the pupils of my primary school, and that's why I think.
And just very quickly, because we are running out of time, but it's interesting to hear from you, James. If there was an influx of pupils into your school, so from that private school, let's say they had to leave because they couldn't pay the additional fees, would your school be able to accommodate them, or is that?
I don't think so. No, it's very tight as always in primary schools, and I think. I come from a comprehensive system many years ago, and I just find this thing of envy of private schools very, very annoying. And I don't have any political allegiance whatsoever. I'm looking out for the school that I look after, that I'm a governor at, and the private school that we have in our locality, along with the 4 or 5 other schools within a 5-mile radius, benefit from that private school.
Well, that's interesting, James. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for all your calls on this. After the break, should